Hello friends, back again with a new JavaScript video, and this is going to be very important because I will be using the concept of array in JavaScript. Let me demonstrate the program first. As you can see over here, I have a form and that has a button. Without giving any input, I click on the button. It states that you need to give a first name. Let me give an arbitrary value. Okay, I give it in the first name input text. Now again I click on the button and it says that last name is required. Okay, that's nice. Again I give an input. I click on the submit button and it says that the email is not filled. Wow, that's nice. Again I'm giving some arbitrarily junk data. Okay, and then I click on the submit button and it says the phone number is also required. So that means each of these inputs have been rightly figured out. Now if I click on submit button, what do you expect? Well, this data should be populated within a table tag, and here it comes. Okay, that's nice. It's neat and clean. But what do you think? Is this enough? No, it's not. If I click on submit but again it prompts the first name is not there. Okay, let's go with another data over here. Again I'm choosing some arbitrary value over here. I click on submit but it says that the email was not filled. Okay, that's nice. And here it comes. Okay, that's great. And I press again, it says phone number is required. Okay, that's good. And I click on this. Oh god, that data too populated along with the previous input. Okay, let's go for one last time. Again, without filling up the data, I click on submit button. Again, validation does work. And see over here, validation is working at every sphere of my action, what I do. So that's a good way of keeping track that whether your data is a sanitized data or not. In data processing or in machine learning, sanitization plays a very important role. So that's how this thing will be helpful. Okay, let me click on submit button and the new data gets populated. Okay, that's really very good. So now let's explore the code and let's see how did I manage to do this. Let me take you to my code structure. I have got a couple of folders, a folder for HTML, a folder for JS. I expand this. I have got index.html. Let me open this file first and let me take you what the code is all about. Let me keep this thing side by side so that you can figure out. As you can see over here, I've given a call to the CDN link for the Bootstrap because this is a Bootstrap presentation. And over here I have gone for the container class of the Bootstrap margin top. So from the top I have given a space of 5. And over here I have gone for text center margin bottom, and is information, user information is right over here. Now comes to the most interesting part of the story. I'm making use of the form tag that's going to contain this whole input, or I can say the DOM tree. Let me explore this. Okay, and apart from that, apart from the form, there are a couple of div tags which are meant for, well, this div tag is meant for validation. So as you can see, without filling up the data, if I click on submit button, this message that is getting populated is because of this particular div tag. This is responsible for displaying this particular validation message, and there is a separate div tag I'm maintaining for my table structure to be rendered, and that will be done by JavaScript. And here is my JavaScript external link. Okay, now get back to the form and let's see what is there inside the form. As you can see right over here, a form has a name. This is very important because in a particular HTML page you can have multiple forms. I repeat, in a single HTML page you can have multiple forms. So naturally the question would be, how would the browser detect which particular form you are referring? So for that reason we need to give a very proper meaningful name for each form perspective. So I've given a name called user form. You are free to choose whatever name you feel like, and it makes use of the row, and there's a gapping of 3, and I want that this entire thing should be at the center. So justify content center is right over here. These are all the Bootstrap classes, so make sure you go through the Bootstrap as well so that your site is going to be a good looking one. And here again I'm giving a calls to the Bootstrap grid property and MD medium device of size 6. Okay, so the 6 is over here, the Bootstrap number of columns. So you can see over here what I've done is that I've created a label called first name, and then I'm taking the input through the help of this DOM element. So if you think in this way, that the form is the parent like you can, if you think in from the DOM tree perspective, the form is one of the node, is a parent node. Now within this form you have got the children. How many children do I have? 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5, right? So 5 children are there, okay, because the last one is the button. So if you can see over here, this is 1, this is 2, this is 3, 4 and 5. So in that perspective you can think, always you should keep it in mind about the DOM tree, okay. So form is the root, not the root element. The root element is of course the DOM document, but the form is the root or the parent of these children, right? And they are siblings. So if you think about this DOM element in perspective to this DOM, then this is called sibling, and this is very important, okay. So make sure you do follow this DOM tree pattern. So let's identify the sibling one by one, and for that reason we have got over here the DOM element that takes the input from the user, and this is the text box. So you can have multiple text box like what you are seeing right over here. So for that reason it is very important you give a proper ID and name for that particular DOM element. Now when you're giving the name, please make sure that your name should not start with uppercase, because it's a case sensitive one. It should follow a camel case approach, and the ID or the name should be a meaningful one, so that it is very easy to figure out that what is the responsibility of that particular DOM element. So that's how the first DOM element has been mentioned. The second DOM element will also follow a similar structure, where the change that takes place is the ID and the name. That's where the major change is coming across. So let's explore one by one. This is that for the email, and here at the time I have mentioned email. So I'm expecting that the input would be in the form of email pattern, and the last one is the phone number. That's the reason why I have mentioned the type as phone, and the respective ID and the name I have given, okay. So far so good. Now let's come to the last DOM element inside the form tag, and that is called button. So what does this button has got? It has got an event called onClick event, and that is going to give a call to a function called submit form. So this function I need to define inside JavaScript, okay. So it's a high time. Let's move on to JS now. Let me expand this. Let's click on this folder and the script right over here. Okay, that's great. So what is there inside the JavaScript? Let me shrink them and see as a overall what it contains. So as you switch from the HTML to JavaScript with the help of the external link, I said already when the user clicks on the button, this particular function will be getting called, and you can see, yes, there's a function by the name called submit form. So whatever name you will give over here, by the same name you need to mention a form. I mean the function name should be exactly the same, right? But wait a while, over here we have got something. What is this? This is an array. So welcome you to JavaScript array, because this is going to be a very important thing for your upcoming days. You have to store multiple data, and for that reason you need array. Well, this is a topic that is there in every programming language, whether you're working on JavaScript or Android, or even you're working on Apple, iOS, Swift, or even if you're working on PHP, or even you're working on Python. Irrespective of whichever programming language you're working on, array is all there. It's a universal concept. So over here I have declared this array outside the function, making it global. So that means this function subform can also access the user data, and the same goes for the function called render table. So make sure you declare the array outside so that it is available to all the functions that are there in the script. So as the user click on the submit button, it gives a call to the submit form. So let's start the exploration with this particular function itself, and here it comes. Don't get scared by the line that is there over here, but they are very straightforward. So as I said that in my HTML we have got a form and we have a form name. So the first thing would be to identify this form, and that's the reason why I've given a call to document, because document is a root element of a DOM tree. And I said just a few minutes ago that in a single HTML page there can be multiple forms. So for that reason here we have got forms. So you can think like this is in form of an array, and here I've given the name of the form, that is the user form. So that means when the user will click on the submit button, it will give a call to this particular function. The first thing that the script should do is to detect the DOM element, identify the DOM element, because until and unless you identify the DOM element, how would you accept data from those elements, right? So for that reason the first task that you will be having is to identify that first DOM element, that is the form. And once you did that, you create a reference of it. I gave the name as form just for simplicity. You can choose any name of your choice. Now inside this particular form you have got how many siblings or how many children. You have got 5 children, 1 2 3 4 and 5. So you need to detect them one by one, and that's what I did, and for that reason I will be using this particular reference variable. Now inside this reference variable you have got all these children by their respective IDs, right? And that's what I'm going to do over here. So form within third bracket, because I already said this is like an array. Inside this array you have got all the siblings. So first name got identified as stored in a variable, last name got identified as stored in a variable, email got identified as stored in a variable, phone number got identified as stored in a variable. Wow, that's great. But what about this one? Well, this DOM element is not the part of the form, it is outside the form, hence I have to use something called getElementById. So document.getElementById followed by the validation message is referring to this empty div tag that will be used for the purpose of displaying the validation message. So this particular DOM element got identified, I store the reference right over here. Okay, that's nice. Now in case if there would be any data holding at the beginning, just to clean that data I have used this particular statement. So the DOM element or the reference name dot inner HTML, be careful about the case, and this is a property of a DOM element, HTML DOM element. I'm using quotation or quotation close just to clean the value in case if it's there. Alright, and now what I have to do is that identification of the DOM element has been done. The second step would be to extract the data from those DOM element, because user has given the input right over here. So for that reason I'm using the value property followed by the trim function. In case if user has given like something like this backspace, I'm giving an empty space over here, and then I wrote something like this again as space. So space at the beginning or at the end will be removed because of the trim function. Wow, that's great. So it will clean the data, no space, and then it will store right again in this variable. So this is a sanitization process where you are ensuring the data that you are picking up from the HTML is not going to have any space on the either side. And that's how these variables are getting framed. Now in case the user has not given an input like this one, I clicked on the button. Okay, I have given the input in the first place, so let me remove this one. Now I click over here, it says that the first name should be filled up, right? And that's what I'm doing. In case this variable they don't hold any value, so it will be empty, and then this particular message will be prompted in this div tag. So validation message div is this div tag, which is empty initially, is now getting rendered with this particular property in HTML, and this is the Bootstrap class danger I'm using, and as you can see over here, that's the reason why it's red in color. So that's how individual variables are been checked whether they contain any data or not, and in case if data has been there, so this validation will not work in that case. Rather we will do something really amazing. Can you guess what this is? Well, this is where we're creating an object. Yes, you rightly heard. Here is where I'm creating an object. So my dear friend, I am going to create object each time when the user is going to fill up the data. Let's go and fill up a new data over here, and this time I'm giving a really good data. So Raj is a name, Aryan is a name, and I just want to check whether the validation is still working. Yeah, of course. So Raj underscore Aryan and the gmail.com, and the phone number is again arbitrary phone number I'm giving just to ensure that everything is working perfectly fine. So for data I have given and the validation has not worked because input has been given successfully. These variables are all initialized with the import. Now I just need to create an object. So user, new user is just an object, and this is going to have the input that the user has given that is stored inside this variable, and that's how the object gets framed. So remember, this object which you are creating is now need to be inserted into the array which I have declared right over here, and for that reason we are using the system defined function called push. A very nice function, push yourself. Yeah, you need to be pushing yourself to be successful, right? So push yourself, push the data into the array, and that's how the array gets filled up. Wow, just really sweet. Great. And now you clean the data so that this table, like, let me click on this. Yeah, I did that, and the data is right over here. And to clean the data I'm using the reset function. See, I'm showing you different functions over here so that you get acquainted yourself and try to utilize this function in your code. That will make your code much optimized. Okay, so this particular function was responsible for identification of DOM, picking up the data, performing the validation, and creating an object, and then push the object inside the array, right? But now I have to print this particular table with the data that is there inside the array. So who would be doing that? Well, I've created one more separate function, so that function will be called right after the completion of the submit form function. Well, you could have done this thing inside this, but that is not what you should do, because each function should be focusing on a particular work. That's how the thing should go on, okay? Otherwise your code will be very dirty code. So let's come and explore on this particular part. Well, don't get again scared with the data, because over here this is a very straightforward thing. Well, the first thing is that I have to identify the DOM element, because I do have another DOM which will be responsible for populating this data, because I'm maintaining two div tag, one for the validation part, the other one is to render the table, and I need to identify this form result, and that's what I'm doing in this particular line. I detected the DOM and I stored the reference right over here. I just want to ensure that the user data array is filled up. I know when the call will come over here, of course user has given the data, otherwise how it will be calling it, how this portion will be working. User input is not there, but still prevention is better than cure. For that reason I did this particular validation, knowing very well that this is not going to work because data will be there. Okay, now let's look at this part. This might be a little bit tricky. Okay, so over here I'm using the backtick, and this has been introduced in the year 6, I believe year 5 most probably. Just go and check it out. Backtick was introduced probably in year 5. Okay, just go and verify it once again. So this backtick is helping me to insert this entire HTML tag. So over here the traditional HTML tag, I've used it because is the table tag I'm going to use, and I'm going for the Bootstrap classes. So Bootstrap table is the base class for the Bootstrap, and it has got table hyphen border, because you can see there's a very nice bordering for each row, for each cell. For that reason the Bootstrap border is there. Table stripe, this is something which is used, like this one is a gray in color, this one is again white, then gray in color. So like a zebra, crisscross coloring is there because of this table striped. And then table hover, right? As I move my mouse point over here, you can see that the hovering effect that is happening. Because of that reason the table hover CSS class has been introduced. So these classes has got very predefined tasks, and you need to be habituated with these classes. So it's very good that you just mug up this, because these classes are just like the way I have written over here. Okay, now over here I have a table heading, as you can see right over here, and for that reason again some Bootstrap class comes in picture. The table dark, the background color is dark in color, the font color is white in color, and the text center, because as you can see these labels are at the center of each column. So for that reason this is there. Okay, and now I'm creating the row for this particular table heading. Hash is there, first name, last name, email and phone number. The following row gets rendered, and that's how this table heading tag comes to an end, and thereafter the body tag starts. Very careful, be over here, the body type starts, and my backtick ends over here, and the variable table HTML got initialized. This is going to play a very important role, and this particular variable is present inside the function. This is local variable for the function. For that reason I've used a late keyword. Okay, whereas if you see at the beginning over here I have also got different functions, but they are being used a const keyword simply because they will be holding one data at a time. Each time you are giving the input, they will be holding one data. So for that reason I've used the word const. But over here when you are rendering, each time you are giving a call to the render function, because as you are filling up the data you are giving a call to the render function. So if there are 4 record over here, that means 4 times the render function got called. So that means the value which will be getting filled up had to be reinitialized. So this particular variable will be called or will be created every time the new record has been generated, right? Okay, that's great. And now I have to fill the data, and for that reason I need to give a call to my array. So over here I have made use of for each loop to iterate over the array. This is a very important, please be careful about this portion. So user data has been filled up with this particular push function call. Each time you have inserted an object, the data has been filled up over here. Now what you're going to do is that you're going to iterate over the data, and for that reason this array has been called. The for each is a new loop that will be responsible for iterating every element that is there in the array. Remember one thing, when you're inserting a new record, this particular array renderization has to take place again. It's not like that the previous data will be there. No, it will be removed. It will just, you have to regenerate once again. Yeah, I do understand you have to give a repetitive call. It might not be optimized, but that's how this particular JavaScript function is going to work. So you need to understand this concept. So over here the array is there. It will pick up one data at a time by the help of the for each function. The data which is picking up, that means let's consider this is the first object that is there in the 0th index of the array. That will be picked up and will be stored inside this particular local variable by the name called user. And when you're working with for each, you need to have one more variable that is called index, just to keep track of the index number, because after all you're working on array. So indexing of array will start from 0. So that's the reason why I have written over here 0 plus 1 to make it 1 over here. So that's how the for each loop is going to work. So for each is a function, and if you see very minutely, you will notice something over here. What is that? Please see it very carefully. Well, this is a parameter for each, undoubtedly, but it's just a parameter. The answer is no. Here you are giving a call to an arrow function, right? So here you are giving a call to an arrow function, and this arrow function is going to represent your table content. So the array who is holding the data, it is in the first iteration. The for each loop picks up the 0th index data, that is an object. It's stored over here, and the index is 0 right now. And again, this particular table HTML is there. I need to concatenate that because I have to populate these rows, and for that reason plus plus assignment operator is there. Plus assignment means it's like table HTML equals to table HTML plus the whole thing that you are doing. So this is a shorthand notation. Well, I know I'm saying a lot of things over here, so you might have to visit this video time and again to understand this. So please visit and check the video again so that you are crystal clear with this concept. This is very important, not only in context of JavaScript, but again when you're working on the backend technology. At that point of time, data will be coming from the REST API, or it might come in the form of an object. You have to iterate over the object, so it's not just confined within JavaScript. It has a bigger picture. So go through this video, please follow the step minutely, and I'm sure you will be able to do it without any issue. So over here I have to regenerate the table content, so that's the reason plus equal is there. So it's a shorthand notation. So what I'm doing, I'm creating each row. So this is one row, this is another row, this is another row. So for that reason the table row is there. So once you have completed the table heading tag, the body tag has already started, and each time this iteration will be going on, you are basically creating the root, table row you are creating, and text center will bring it at the center. And what I'm doing, these are the table data. So this is the ID, as you can see over here. This is the first name, this is the first name, then the last name, and then the email, and then the phone number comes up, and that's how the first row gets generated, and that's how this first entry took place. Again, when you will iterate over the next object that will come over here, again this particular table will be executed and the new row will be added. In this way it will consume all the object that is there in the array, and once it is done, then you have to close the table tag. And that's the reason why again I'm going for the concatenation. Plus equal is there, so it's a concatenation. You're closing the table body, you're closing the table tag, which you have started right over here. Okay, that's how the thing is going to work. This is very important. I've said it a number of times. Now what I have to do is that I have to just pass on this particular table tag to this particular div which I have created so that it can be printed. And already I've identified the div over here, and that reference I'm using .innerHTML is a property of one HTML element, and there where the whole content has been simply embedded. Yes, you rightly heard, the content is getting embedded inside this particular empty div tag, and as a result this div is getting filled up at runtime. So one more time, let's run the code, and let me give my name this time. And here is my last name. Let's go and check the validation. Yes, amazing, it's working very fine. So swaroop@gmail.com, and I give a phone number. My phone number is, well, I don't want to share my phone number, so I'm just giving an arbitrary phone number over here, and let's click on submit button, and that's how the row comes. So far so good, really very sweet and very hot. Of course, array is a hot topic because this is something that is important both for front end as well as for back end technology. Make sure you go through this video. I believe this will be quite helpful. Okay, so that's how this video comes to an end, and in my next video I will explore more because we have got a good number of functions in context to an array. Over here I have made use of for each, and now what is waiting is something called map. So map also plays a very important role when it comes to an array, but the whole concept of map is different in context of for each. So stay tuned and take care. Bye bye.